Good evening, everybody. This is Sarit Zavi from the Alma Center. Actually, I'm speaking to you from my bomb shelter. We just have sirens all around with some drones that came from Lebanon, and I ran quickly to establish the whole setup in the bomb shelter. So I hope things will be calm and you will not get a chance to meet my family and the dogs and sirens just outside. So yes, I chose to start this and to do this today. It's not just update. I wanted to host Yaakov Lapin with us today, and Yaakov is a research fellow at the Alma Center and is a correspondent in the I-24, and he's writing for the JNS. And maybe Yaakov, you're doing some more stuff that I forgot, but actually is an excellent analyst on everything that is happening around us. And I thought that Yaakov can contribute to this conversation a little bit more about the regional issues. But I will start with a short update and then we'll take it from there. So I just wanted to start from very personal point of view, and what you can see in the pictures is the photo on the left is actually a hit in my hometown. One out of four. There were a few houses that were actually hit from Hezbollah rockets. I took this picture. It was a crazy evening, and the blasts were like huge. Immediately, I knew that these are hits in my hometown. Actually, my daughter and my husband were outside. They were just arriving home, so they saw one of the hits. It's really, what can I say? It's shaking. It's shaking your everyday life, and it doesn't matter whether you are an expert to these issues or not. It is always scary when it involves your family. So that's basically the experience. The problem is that we have 15 seconds to get to the bomb shelters, and it's not enough. It's very different from the center of Israel. You don't walk to the bomb shelter, you run to the bomb shelter. And even when you run to the bomb shelter, you don't make it on time. That's what happened to my daughter and husband. And they came in after all the blasts. So that's one example. And the other example that I put here, it's from Tzfat, which used to be called the capital of the Galilee, or maybe it is still the capital of the Galilee, the biggest town in the Galilee. And you can see a part of an Iranian missile, and it is as big as the truck. And that's why I wanted you to see this. This is a typical missile of Iran. Yaakov, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hormashar, or something of the sort.
That's as good as my Persian pronunciation. Yeah.
And I don't know whether this one was with cluster bombs or just very heavy, but it's a missile that was intercepted, and that's part of it that landed in Tzfat. And you can see it's written the mayor on this person's vest. This is the mayor of Tzfat watching the evacuation of that, and you can see that it's just inside the neighborhood. So that's an example of the daily life in Israel here. And moving forward to what's happening with Hezbollah, I can summarize it with really very shortly from all the data that you can see in this slide, that the continuous and consistent acceleration and raise in the amount of attacks in the past few days. Some of it is towards Israeli forces fighting in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, but the vast majority is still towards Israel, towards the communities, towards whatever, as you can understand, falling everywhere. And you can see from my graphs here that about a quarter of the attacks are drones attacks, sending a lot of people to the bomb shelter. The good news is that they are vastly intercepted. And the other part is rockets. It's a lot of rockets, usually a few in each barrage. Usually intercepted. I don't know what happened here in my hometown that they actually hit. But we do have some people who were wounded because of those rockets, not only here in my town, but also in other towns. And we did have some damages in homes that were created. I want to share with you for a moment, because you are my special audience tonight, how do we create these numbers? First, you can understand that it's not missiles, it's waves of attacks, because we don't know how many missiles or drones are being launched in each attack. It's really difficult to understand. And anyway, it's still represent the trend, and you understand that the numbers are huge. But how do we get to those numbers? We are crossing information. We don't rely just on one source. And I want to give you two examples. One is the alerts in Israel. It's just a print screen that I put from my cell phone of one of them today. or yesterday, was it yesterday? And another one is Hezbollah's statements that is claiming responsibility to many of the attacks, not all of them, by the way. Not everything is completely reliable with Hezbollah statements. Even with the sirens, it's not always representative of everything that is happening, and that's why we are crossing information and we are checking with what is happening, with what is being published of the hits and interceptions and IDF statements, etc. It was important for me to bring this map of Hezbollah because Hezbollah is saying very clearly that it is attacking not only military targets in Israel, but also it is attacking communities. Following this map, you can always find also a text in Hezbollah's platforms. And for instance, in this case, they published that they attacked Haifa, Kiryat Shmona, Nahariya, and Avivim. This is from yesterday as communities. This was the target, the settlements, actually. That's the term they are using. For them, this area is the occupied Palestine. It's not, there is no Israel in this area. So this is just, I wanted to share with you a little bit of this example. So what happened this week, how this war developed? One of the things that Israel had done, and you can see it in the video, is bombing the bridges on the Litani River. It looks like this is a civilian target, but it was important for me to talk about it because what happened on those bridges? Actually, two things happened in the past few weeks on those bridges. One is the evacuation of the Lebanese population from south to north, following the Israeli warnings to get out of the war zones. This is very important, enabling us to avoid or at least to minimize collateral damage while maneuvering in those places while Hezbollah was hiding the rockets inside the home, so it's very important. And the second is the Hezbollah going south. IDF published that about 1,000 Radwan brigades, military operatives, went crossed the Litani and went south, of course, also with equipment. Not all of it, by the way, some of it was waiting for them in south of the Litani. And those bridges were used for military purposes, and that's why they are legitimate targets eventually. This is just an example of something that it was important for me to share. It's a big question here of what kind of infrastructures we can or we want to attack in Lebanon, and bridges is a good example for an infrastructure that we had no choice but to attack, but actually we waited because we waited for the Lebanese population to go up north, but at the same time, Hezbollah went down south. So this is like the question of how do you bring security, but at the same time avoid collateral damage, a little bit of, to share with you a little bit of the dilemmas that we are having here. IDF started the maneuver, published today those pictures from one of the homes. Clearly you can see it's a home of weapons. The weapon that you see in the pictures are mainly anti-tank missiles to short distance relatively to what we are familiar. When I'm saying anti-tank missiles, I want to make sure that we all understand each other. It doesn't mean that they are only launched against tanks. In the previous campaign in 2024, these were launched against everything, like homes and civilians and farmers and whatever. They are very accurate. There is no alert when these are launched. Iron Dome cannot intercept them. In the current campaign, they were mainly launched against IDF soldiers. It's an open question whether it's a matter of choice or a matter of capability. Maybe we shall discuss this. And maybe here, Lapin, I want to address the question to you. If you can tell us a little bit with a few words about the IDF maneuver in Lebanon now, how does that look like? What do you see from your side in this issue?
Sure. And also, I'll just begin by also adding that audience members, if you want to ask questions, you don't need to wait until the end. You can type them away in the Q&A box. I'm going to see them and I will share them with Sarit, and we're happy to take them on. I already see your questions. So feel free. This is an interactive conversation. And look, this is a very interesting operation in southern Lebanon. First of all, of course, for operational reasons, the IDF is keeping its cards close to its chests, and we don't have the full details of locations, and nor do we want to have that information. But we're talking about multiple divisions that are maneuvering in southern Lebanon in a targeted manner. They're not describing this as a large ground offensive. They're describing this as basically setting up what they call a forward defense position. So before Hezbollah decided to get involved in this war on the 2nd of March by firing rockets on Haifa, the IDF already had 5 outposts that were strategically located in southern Lebanon on higher ground, higher terrain, protecting northern Israeli communities. And as soon as
Actually, one of them I can see from my community.
right. This is the advantage of talking about this stuff with you, Sarit, because you can see it with your eyes. I'm located in central Israel, and you can see that position. And now, since the war began, what we have seen is a significant beefing up of that. Now, I don't know if you want to call it a buffer zone, a security zone. We don't exactly know what it's going to turn into just yet, but it's an expanded IDF presence. And the first goal of it is to push Hezbollah further away from the border, push back its anti-tank missile launchers, push back the units that Sarit just described, push the threat back. And this is a very basic understanding from the 7th of October that there can never again be a situation in which civilian communities, just like Sarit's, there'll be nothing standing between them and the enemy. There can't be any such situation again. So the IDF has expanded its buffer zone, multiple divisions. Now we're also hearing reports that the first line of villages is basically being targeted as a military base of Hezbollah because Hezbollah used these villages for multiple reasons. First of all, to fire on Israeli communities directly from higher up. And second of all, they wanted to launch an invasion from these Shiite villages on the border, just as Hamas did on October 7th. In fact, Hamas copied and pasted the whole idea of a mass invasion from Hezbollah. This was Hezbollah's plan for the Western Galilee, and it ended up being applied tragically in the Western Negev. So pushing Hezbollah back, we're constantly getting reports from the IDF about raids that various brigades are doing, infantry brigades, armored corps is there, of course, engineering. They're all there and they're gradually expanding their presence and their operations. And at the same time, we also have multiple bridges connecting southern Lebanon to the other side of the Litani River. They're being destroyed by the IDF. And the reason for that is simple. This is about cutting off Hezbollah's logistical resupply capability. So Hezbollah was using these bridges to insert terrorist operatives and weapons and equipment. Destroy the bridges, Hezbollah loses access to southern Lebanon. And the last thing I'll say about this is that it's very important to note this is a very dramatic development. Hundreds of thousands of southern Lebanese residents, primarily Shiites, these are the human shields of Hezbollah and also the base of Hezbollah, they have been evacuated. They have left southern Lebanon. So that means that the Hezbollah operatives are now, they've been stripped away of their human shields. That's going to make the combat a lot more straightforward for the IDF. So that is,
I would say from my experience
yeah,
in this business for many years, is that we don't know whether it's how many actually left, and sometimes you will see collateral damage, even in areas that you thought that they all left, and then you find out that Hezbollah made sure that they will stay in various ways. But I want to move forward, Lapin, and I want to continue to talk a little bit about how these weapons get to Hezbollah. And we've seen the Syrian forces seizing weapons, and I spoke about it in previous webinars that the Syrian forces were deployed along the Lebanese-Syrian border. They seized in the past, between the two campaigns, they seized like on almost a weekly basic weapons of Hezbollah. And everybody believed that Syria is no longer the bridge or the corridor, the land corridor between Iran and Hezbollah. And what we gradually understood is that those smugglings are ongoing, even though the Syrian government is seizing some of it, but it naturally cannot seize all of it because it's a border of about 400 kilometers with no wall or fence or whatever. And there is an interest of local smugglers to enable that. There is an interest of Hezbollah to enable that. And the terrain is very difficult, but you can hide in those. It's also giving an advantage in those hills and valleys for the smugglers to do it secretly. Eventually, what we understand that some of this work, by the way, the same weapons that was found by the IDF and published today in this home in South Lebanon is the same weapon that you see in the picture here that was seized, the anti-tank missiles Concourse that was seized in March 14. This is very interesting. I was thinking that those pictures because I was thinking that maybe those weapons were made to be used for three goals. One of them is Israel. The other is for the option of a civil war in Lebanon. And the third one is for the option of a campaign between Hezbollah and the Syrian forces, the jihadi forces of Al-Jalani, if they will decide to cross the border and like revenge Hezbollah for what they had done to them during the civil war. All in all, we can say that the smuggling didn't stop, and this is what enabled it was part of the enabler of Hezbollah to prepare for this second campaign. Now, I want to move forward to Iran, and these are the numbers that, again, we are following the attack waves, and we saw that except for the weekend, basically it's pretty war of attrition, a very stable war of attrition that Iran is launching. It involves regular, very heavy missiles that can destroy a neighborhood, like what happened just on Saturday in Arad and Dimona. And it can involve cluster bombs that create like 20 scenes of fall, and you need to intercept them in a very specific place. Otherwise, the cluster bombs are spread and it's difficult. Lapin, I want to move it forward to you here and start with my first question that I believe we have many interesting things to talk about today, but I think that the question that interesting everybody here is the question of Hormuz Straits. Okay, I'm using this slide as a story. It doesn't represent the situation today. It represents the story of the ships that were, in green, it's the ships that were attacked this way or another by the Iranians. Most of the red signs in this map were probably attacked by the Americans that are saying again and again that they eliminated the Navy. So what does that mean, the sentence, the Strait of Hormuz are closed? What does that physically mean in the terrain?
What it means right now is that there's no maritime shipping going on in that strait. And the reason for that is because the insurance companies and the oil tanker operators are simply too scared, understandably, to take the risk of moving through basically a war zone. And so they're not even trying. The last confirmed strike, Iranian strike on one of these tankers was, at least according to my rough check, was about 3 days ago. And since then, there hasn't been any. And that doesn't tell us about the Iranian capabilities. It tells us that there's no maritime traffic, and that's the definition of a closed strait. At the same time, I think it's important to note that when you look at the situation assessment that is being put out by CENTCOM, which is responsible for eliminating the Iranian Navy, including its mine-laying ships, including the shore-to-sea missile capabilities, which is very important for the Iranians to try and disrupt the Straits of Hormuz, and also the bases, the short range and medium range bases, we see extensive damage. So we have to assume that the Iranian ability to disrupt shipping in the Straits of Hormuz, it still certainly exists, but it's degraded. It's highly degraded. And that brings me to something else that you showed in your slide before we talked about the Straits of Hormuz. When we're looking at Iran's capabilities as a whole, it's very interesting what they're doing. The Iranians, they're basically, what they've been doing is trying to keep up a high frequency of attacks on Israel, missile attacks, in order to make everybody forget the fact that something like 90% of the volume of the missiles, which is a different statistic to the frequency, it's dropped by 90%. And
So
that
you published a report exactly around this question. Maybe I just want to develop the question about the achievements of the campaign, the American-Israeli campaign. Maybe you can give us a small overview, a short overview of what did you write about? What's the achievements? Because people see that it's not ending. It's been almost 4 weeks now. Do we see truly achievements in this military campaign of Israel? And is this going to make a difference? This Israeli and American campaign?
in my view, absolutely. I think this is a historic campaign, and the achievements are actually too many. I couldn't fit them all into the report, Salit, and this was not a short report. It's probably the longest report I've done for Alma. It's the achievements are absolutely historic from a military perspective, and I'll get into that in just a second. By the way, I'm seeing your questions, so we're going to get to them, and feel free to keep them coming. And the thing with the missile statistic is that we've had over 400 ballistic missiles fired at Israel since the start of the war. Even though there's been a 90% drop, that's the accumulated number. Out of those, we have 4 direct missile impacts of warheads, of ballistic missile warheads, direct impacts. So more than 400, and out of those, 4 direct impacts. And that gives you a sense of the air defense, the Israeli air defense system here that's at work. The figures that we've heard is 92% interception rate. That also includes the cluster munitions that, if they're not intercepted in time, they release cluster munitions that are about the size of a Grad rocket, and that's
But the
basically
92% also refers to the drones, or these are just the missiles?
The drone interception rate is even higher. It's at 99%, Salit, from Iran. 99% interception of all drones that the Iranians have fired at the state of Israel. It's a phenomenal figure. It's actually very similar to the one that we achieved back in June. So, look, my report basically looked at 5 different categories of capabilities that were targeted and still are being targeted as we speak in terms of the Iranian regime. One is the missile program. That's the most important, obviously, for Israel, and that was the trigger for the war. And it's important to stress that the Iranians, between the end of the last war in June and on the eve of this war, they had built 1,000 missiles. That's an incredibly fast industrial production rate. I think it's surprising. Had this information been public before the war, I would not have had any doubt that this war would be coming, because that is an existential threat to Israel, irrespective of the nuclear file, the nuclear project. Iran wanted to build 8,000 of these missiles, and on the eve of this war, they already had 2,500. So they built from 1,500 to 2,500, and they wanted to get to mass production by next year to get to 8,000. And that, in and of itself, all we have to do is look at what happened in the south 2 days ago in Arad, in Dimona. Just imagine 8,000 of those neighborhood destroying warheads. It doesn't matter how good your air defense system is. That's a saturation
So
of the
I
system.
must ask you a question that I believe many Israelis are asking at this point. So what was all about Rising Lion? Okay, we've done Rising Lion. We were positive that it was an amazing achievement. It was an unbelievable operation, operational wise and intelligence wise. And
Yeah.
now we find out that the situation only got worse. Can you
So
give me, like, why
Rising,
did we need to do it? Been there, done that again.
and it's a good question, and a lot of people thought that after Rising Lion that we would have a break. Rising Lion was actually triggered by the nuclear program. Unlike this war, the nuclear program in Rising Lion, intelligence that the Iranians were breaking out to a nuclear weapon, is what triggered that Israeli operation. And that's why you see, in terms of the targets, the families of targets that were hit, the nuclear program was the star, quote unquote, of that June war. And their nuclear program has not recovered from that war. There were attempts to recover it slowly in hidden sites. Those sites were hit in this war. But the main 3 sites, which were hit by both Israel and the United States, Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan, and a whole cluster of peripheral sites, did not make a recovery at all after that war. And that was the war's main achievement. So, look, in terms of the missile program, the IDF every few days gives a lot of information out. And the last statistics we have about the damage that was caused to the Iranian missile program, I'm telling you already, they're already out of date. So you add whatever I'm going to tell you, add some percentages to this. But we're looking at 70% destruction of their launchers. It's more than that by now. 70% of their missile storage facilities have been destroyed. The big majority of their missile production industrial base has been destroyed. And those are the 3 components. Those are the 3 most important components of a missile program: the production, the storage, and the launch. Most of the missiles that we're now facing are being fired from trucks that are made to look like civilian trucks from the air, and they're being hunted by jets and drones in the mountains of Iran. Iran is a huge country. It's bigger than France and Germany and Italy all put together. It's
Racks and silos, yes, that are also being attacked as we speak. The
yes,
small holes in the
absolutely.
mountains that the missile can just pop out and be launched. That's it.
Yes, but there is a disadvantage to the, even if it's a hidden silo, a stationary missile launcher is much more likely to be discovered than the mobile one. The mobile ones are designed to launch, fire their missile payload, and then to hide somewhere, to hide and get out of the way of the sensors, because once the radar picks up a missile launch, you can be sure that the drones are going to be coming to that sector and looking for it. And these are armed drones, so they can either call in strikes themselves or carry out the strikes. And this is the cat and mouse that we're looking at. So most of the launchers have been destroyed. We are seeing a big decrease in the volume of the fire. And today, by the way, has been, knock on wood, one of the most quiet days in central Israel. And it's not because the Iranians don't want to fire. They certainly want to fire a lot more than what they're firing. Now, the leadership chapter of this report, I just couldn't believe it when I was going through not only Ayatollah Khamenei, which, by the way, there's a very sort of cynical dialogue saying, oh, we took out Khamenei, now his son, Mujtaba, who knows what his situation is, he's just as extreme. What have we done here? And I profoundly disagree with that, because I think the messaging here of this is not a secretary general of a terror organization, even though that's also important, like Nasrallah, who was killed in his bunker, or Yehya Sinwar, who was killed in Gaza. This is the head of a state of 92 million people and the head of the Islamic Revolution. And he's considered a holy figure by the jihadist Shiite organizations that he nourishes and helped set up all over the Middle East. And removing him in the head of Tehran, in the heart of Tehran, sorry, is an extremely powerful message in my view, which says that anybody who is planning on destroying the state of Israel is going to be destroyed first wherever they are and whoever they are. I think that's a profoundly powerful message. Now, not only was Ayatollah Khamenei eliminated, but so was the commander of the IRGC, so was the commander of the Besiege, of course. That's a different chapter. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm talking about the chief of staff, the Iranian chief of staff. And many of these commanders were replacements of predecessors who were eliminated in June, and some of them were replacements of their predecessors. So we're talking about triple replacements being eliminated. And again, we're not talking about Gaza. We're not talking about arenas that are 50 to 100 kilometers away from the air bases. We're talking about an arena that's 2,000 kilometers away to the east. And this is truly a historic achievement for the Israeli Air Force and, of course, also for the United States Air Force and Navy for all of the incredible operations that they've been doing as well. And combined, we're talking about more than 15,000 targets that have been struck, and it's probably already higher. So
by both Israel and United States, that's the sum
correct.
of the
Correct.
total. Okay.
It's more than that already, but when I was putting this report together at the final draft, that's where it was. Israel is about 8,500 targets. So it's just about half and half. Now, their
Wow,
nuclear
this is
program,
amazing what you just said. Like Israel,
yes,
United States, and it's half and half. It's unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. And just the fact, Salit, that we have Israel and the United States fighting a war together, there's nothing trivial about this. This has never happened before. They have certainly trained for this, but now we're seeing it in action. And in fact, the last time Israel was in any kind of actual coalition was back in 1956 during the Sinai
Yeah.
operation. That was a totally different world back then, but this is the first time that Israel is fighting a war in a coalition with the United States. Truly historic. And when you talk to the military people in the Air Force and in the general staff, they're very moved by the fact that they're fighting shoulder to shoulder with their American brothers and sisters in arms. They find a lot of historical significance in this moment. But
So
it's
before we move
yeah,
forward to the questions, you said you're going to get to the besiege, and I want to connect
yeah.
two questions together here. The question of, okay, what does it take now after everything that we both did to truly enable the people of Iran to go out to the streets? And second, what kind of regional impact this is going to do, or vice versa. If the regime will not fall, which is an option, what will
Mhm.
happen then?
Yeah. So look, here's the way I read the situation, and this is just my personal reading, and I offer it as a theory for anybody to take or leave. The critical objective, the most immediate objective of this war from Israel's perspective, and also, of course, from the American perspective, is to roll back very dangerous Iranian capabilities, and we're talking about existential threats as far as Israel is concerned, to roll those back, bring them right down so that we're no longer facing existential threats from thousands of missiles, from attempts to restart a nuclear program, and the proxy program, the Iranian proxy program, the proxy ring of fire, as we like to call it. So those are the three pillars of the Iranian plan to destroy the state of Israel. This was a functional operational plan: nuclear program, missiles, and proxies. And the goal of this war is focused on the missiles, but also on the proxy, because everything that's going on in Lebanon is part of the same war. That's the Iranian proxy in Lebanon being rolled back, and we have the head of the snake and its capabilities. Once that objective is achieved, and I think we're far closer to achieving it now than we were 3 weeks ago, the progress has been phenomenal in my view. The question of regime fall, regime change, this is not a military
Okay.
question. This is a question that is
Lapin, I lost you. I'm not sure whether everybody can
ah,
see me or can see Lapin.
I can hear you, but I can't see you. I don't know if it's my internet or yours. I can see you now. Can you hear me?
And sorry it has disconnected. Just keep
Ah,
going on with your question.
okay. So I think my internet is the one that's okay here. Okay, so I'm going to continue. So what I was saying is that the primary objective of this war from Israel's perspective is to roll back existential threats. And the question of regime change, it's an aspiration. It's something we all want to see happen. It's the ultimate objective because the regime is the catalyst, obviously, for all of the threats that we've been discussing. Missiles, nuclear program, Hezbollah in Lebanon, all of that is a product. The root cause is the existence of the Islamic Republic and its obsessive ideology of exporting the Islamic revolution. So, of course, we want to see the regime fall. Now, it's not just an aspiration. This brings us to the besieged part of my report. The Israeli Air Force has taken it upon itself as one of the missions to destabilize and shake up the pillars of the regime to the maximum extent possible with the available resources. And that means hundreds of attacks on besieged bases, the besieged commander, the besieged, which is the murderous internal repressive mechanism, which has killed, according to reports, 35,000 Iranians in the space of a few days. This is one of the biggest war crimes in modern history. The besieged is a major primary target, family of targets for the Israeli Air Force.
I
So
think
definitely,
that, I don't know what you think, but I think that 15,000 attacks, there is a long list yet because Iran is half the size of Europe. We are going against regime institutions. Besiege, only if you think of besiege, it should be thousands of targets there. Uh, there is still a list of targets that should be attacked in order to truly enable the civilians to do their part. Maybe, Lapi, now I think we should jump into the questions because there are so many.
okay.
And here I'm giving you to lead here because you can read in English faster than myself.
No problem. I'm going to start at the top so that we're going to get to every question here. And I'll just say about the Besieged, this is a huge organization, so there's no way that we're going to hit everything. They've got, by some estimates, 1 million militia members. Some say it's less, 500,000, but whichever way you look at it, it's all about hitting them where it hurts the most, maximum optimal damage. At some point, the question of regime change is going to have to be settled by other parties, the Iranian people, the opposition. It cannot be something that is militarily known in advance. That's what makes this goal so different, for example, from the ability to measure how many missile launchers we've hit, what the status of the nuclear program. Those are families of targets that are completely measurable. You can't measure when a regime is going to fall. Nobody knows. It's always
Right.
shrouded in mystery. And that's why I think we have to be humble. It's good that it's a war goal, but we really have no idea when it's going to happen. And until it does, I'll just say the last thing about this. My view is the goal is to keep this regime broken and unable to project its ideology and power beyond its borders in a big way like it used to do before. That has to be to preserve these gains going forward until the regime does fall. I think that would be the correct and realistic strategy. So,
I think we can agree that it's a process and it
right,
may take a while. Like we need
exactly.
to be patient.
Exactly. Patience in the Middle East. It's time we also internalized it. So let's go to the questions. The first question that I'm seeing here is what impact will moving some of the IDF forces to the West Bank have on the action in the North? That's asked by an anonymous person. Look, the IDF is always rotating its units. Obviously, the North is now getting precedent because it's the primary ground active combat zone. So that's going to take first precedence over Gaza and the West Bank. But they're always basically doing this rotation. And now we've got reserves that have been called up once again, some of them after months and months of fighting, some of them after 2 years of fighting. So this is all about basically trying to fine tune the allocation of resources. And the Lebanese arena is going to get the priority right now in terms of divisions, brigades, battalions, and also the air power that is needed to protect them. Iran is still the primary air arena, but a lot of Air Force resources are going to be dedicated to Lebanon as well.
Maybe I can connect to that and
Sure.
say that my assessment, maybe I'm wrong, but my assessment is that even if, and people are talking about negotiations now between Iran and the US, we've seen some reports today, even if the campaign in Iran will end, Israel would want to continue the campaign in Lebanon until it will achieve a prominent military achievement there to gain a much better agreement than what we had in 2024. I don't know whether I'm answering other questions here, by the way, but I feel that this is something that needs to be clarified.
Yeah. Okay. And let's go to the next question here. How long do you think the IDF forces need to stay in southern Lebanon to secure the area and stop the rocket attacks from the section? That's a critical question from Amparo. Salit, I'm going to throw it over to you in a second, but I will just say that I think whatever the answer is, it's going to be a long time.
Yeah.
I don't see a situation of a rapid pullback. because as soon as that pullback happens, Hezbollah is going to move straight back in, and that's just going in circles. I think there's a real intention here by the Israeli government to create a new situation in the north and to create permanent security. And that's why I don't think that the IDF forces are going to be withdrawing anytime soon from southern Lebanon.
I think that this discussion is premature, and we published a policy paper a week ago, and we discussed what is victory, what can be done in order to bring a truly change. And we said that the military achievement is one thing, the efforts of Lebanese government is another thing, if they will happen. Until now, there are no efforts, let's be honest, it's just statements. And third is the pressure from international community and going after, follow the money, going after the finance activity of Hezbollah. But clearly we cannot give up military achievements if the other two are not working and Hezbollah is still capable of recovering. I think for now, to discuss of what's the size of the buffer zone, what's the terms of the buffer zone, how long is all of that is questions that should be discussed in light of the other routes in this journey of solving the problem, which is the routes, the Lebanese government, what they will do around that, what Hezbollah will do, what will happen in Iran. There are so many questions now that if we will now say how long we're going to stay, in which areas we're going to stay, and in what terms, we're actually making a mistake. We shouldn't do it now. We should do the best we can to get the best military achievement we can, to go all the way to Litani, to clear those areas, which here I agree, it's going to take a while. It's not something that you can do within a week or two. Quicker than Gaza, because no hostages and I hope no civilians, but much slower than just a week or two. And at the same time, to decide how the agreement would look like and what exactly the arrangement would look like, it's too soon. Let's see in what terms we're going to get to the ending point.
By the way, I'm noticing that there are questions appearing in two boxes. One is the webinar chat, one is the Q&A. So I'm seeing both now. So we're going to try and get to both of those boxes. A question from Larry, is there a way to jam Iranian missiles? Larry, I think you're referring to electronic warfare. If that's what you meant by jamming, I assume that's what you meant. And if so, I think that the answer is yes, but of course it's rather classified. But I think it's fair to say that EW, electronic warfare, is a core part of any anti-missile defense approach. So it's fair to assume that they're also attempting to do it against Iranian missiles, but I'm saying this as an assumption, and the rest is right now and for a while longer going to be out of the public domain, but it's a fair assumption. So another question we have here regarding a major ground operation and captured IDF soldiers, are there concerns about that? How that could impact the war? How tactically can it be prevented? I'll just say something about that because, of course, it's a concern and it's something that would be a goldmine for Hezbollah strategically. It's absolutely has to be avoided at every cost. How is it being prevented? It's being prevented by a range of means. First of all, the IDF, when it sends units into enemy territory, it's gathering intelligence through a network of sensors from the air, from the ground, and they're all being pooled into command centers that are designed to detect threats and to support the ground forces with firepower and to exchange real-time information. This is very much a digital combat field in many ways, and the entire command and control and intelligence gathering and what they like to call the sensor to shooter cycle, this is all done to provide that envelope of protection. And that means that it's going to be hard, not impossible, but very hard for Hezbollah to come close to the IDF without being detected. And that's why we're seeing most of the attacks right now are happening at a distance. You're seeing Hezbollah firing anti-tank missiles from a distance. You're seeing them trying to target the IDF with guerrilla hit and run, but the danger is always there. It's absolutely there. There are also tunnels in this area. So of course it's a danger, and the IDF is making every effort to provide that protective envelope for its
I want to
forces.
say two things about that. First, there is no 100% in war. And with all the precautions that we'll take, it may happen. And it's a dangerous scenario. It can impact the whole campaign, no doubt. And we've seen this in 2014 with the kidnapping of a blackout up in here. But we've seen this happening also in 2014, by the way, in the last day of the campaign, that they kidnapped, Adar Goldin, that we only get to bring him back home in the current campaign, which was a huge mistake messaging wise of how loyal are we to our heroes? And that's why this time we're not going to give up. We are going to bring everybody home. And I think that, by the way, with regard to hostages, I think that what Hezbollah must learn, that we are literally upside down Gaza, upside down Lebanon to bring back our soldiers. I'm not sure it's a price they are willing to pay. That's one thing. Second, we've seen this guerrilla fighting also in the previous campaign in 2024. And for me, the feeling was that, oh, Hezbollah military operatives are not that brave. They are not everything that we used to think about them. And it gives me actually encouragement that our soldiers are no less motivated and maybe even braver when we speak about morale and when we speak about decisiveness. And with all the difficulties, I'm not saying that it's going to be a piece of cake. It's not going to be a walk in the park. To maneuver in Lebanon, it's challenging. It's a difficult terrain with a lot of hills and valleys and a lot of places to hide, not in tunnels and above the ground as well. But to see what's happening until now, it's pretty encouraging.
Okay, now we have a question. I'm going to slightly shorten the question because it's a long one, but the question is what can be done about the missiles? The question noted some of the recent missile strikes in Dimona and Arad. Is the injuries are increasing and there's a lot of damage. So there is significant damage, but I would urge you, Carrie, the person who asked this question, to look at the big picture for a moment. If we're talking about over 400 ballistic missile launches, and out of those, we're talking about 4 direct impacts since the start of the war. The cluster munitions are a separate threat, and they are definitely a challenge, no question about it. But the big warheads, the half-ton and one-ton warheads, the vast majority of those are being intercepted. So that's very important. And obviously, in the media and public attention, it always goes to the misses. It always goes to what gets through. And generally, by the way, in security, it's very interesting to note that the one that slips through the net is the one that gets all the attention. And the ones that get the successful thwarting of threats usually is in the background and quiet. But as long as the ratio is that the big majority of threats are thwarted and the small minority get through, then that to me represents overall a major achievement for Israel's air defenses. The cluster munitions are much smaller, absolutely dangerous, but civilians that are in safe rooms or shelters should be protected from those. The safe rooms and shelters should be able to stand up to a direct impact from a 5 kilogram, for example, a cluster munition warhead. These are the size of warheads that both the north and the south of Israel have been dealing with for decades. And now we in central Israel are tasting them as well. If you compare to what we were dealing with back in June, when Iran was firing volleys of dozens of missiles daily, and out of every sort of 50, 60, we would get 4 or 5 strikes, the situation is significantly improved compared to that war. So what's being done about the missiles is
I think
striking the
also that
launchers.
also our aerial defense systems are learning and they are becoming better. And I believe they will become better with the cluster bombs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a cat and mouse game between the engineers of the air defense systems and the Iranian missile engineers. War is a contest of learning just as much as it is an exchange of bombs and bullets. Another question that we have here from Amparo: How can Israel penalize the Lebanese government for failing to stop to act Hezbollah from firing those anti-tank missiles towards Israel? Salit, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Wow, I have a list of suggestions. I don't think we should penalize. Look, the Lebanese government is hardly getting any money of international assistance even before the current campaign because everybody in the world understood that things are not happening. I think that there should be a hand-in-hand involvement of the Americans, of the French, which are until now playing a negative role in this because they are willing to compromise too much. And that way to make sure that the right things are happening in the Lebanese government. For instance, you want to get salaries to the Lebanese army? Fine, let's make sure that you are firing the officers that are collaborating with Hezbollah. You want to get money for the reconstruction of Lebanon? Fine, let's make sure that the advisor for the president who is responsible for the reconstruction of Lebanon is not a Hezbollah member, which this is the situation today. So I think that there are things that could be done one against the other to make sure that the Lebanese government is doing what needs to be done right now when it is still war, when, it's not a ceasefire, and to make sure that it's not just statements. And it goes back to all those promises that they banned the military activity of Hezbollah pretty much at the beginning. But what they had done around that until now, they only arrested 4 Hezbollah military operatives. This has no meaning, and they can do much more. So it's not only about punishment. I think it's a lot of about incentives. You want the incentives? Fine, let's see what you can do in order to get those incentives. And step by step, hand in hand, and to be very decisive and to have one international front, which is not the case today, unfortunately. There are those who want to see a compromise and ceasing of the war and de-escalation rather than peace, and that this is a huge mistake.
Okay, I'm going to jump to the other box because we also have questions from there, and I don't want this box to feel neglected. We have two boxes here competing with questions. We have a question from Cliff about Lebanon's government if it decides to use this moment to work with Israel more overtly to take down Hezbollah. Will the LAF support it? Will that goal be aided by Christian Druze and or Sunni forces, or some combination of this? Or does this question make it very unlikely that the Lebanese government will become more aggressive towards Hezbollah? I'm throwing it back to you, Sarit. This is something that you've been talking and
Uh,
studying and researching for years.
Yeah, it's a big question. There are different answers among the different researchers, and many are positive that it can do more. I think that militarily it can do very little. That's why I gave the examples that are around politics and money, closing the banks, things like that. The Lebanese army and the Lebanese in general are most afraid of a civil war. Actually, it's unbelievable. With everything that is happening, they are more afraid of a civil war than from what we are doing right now as Israelis to Hezbollah and the damages that are caused naturally also to Lebanon. And this is a problem because they don't want to disarm Hezbollah violently, and Hezbollah is not willing to disarm. The commander of the army already made it very clear. We see a gap between the president and the prime minister. The prime minister is willing to go an extra mile while the president is not willing to go this way. And that's why I think that, okay, let's leave Israel to disarm Hezbollah or at least to eliminate as much as possible of its military capabilities. And let's make sure that Lebanon is the one who is blocking the rehabilitation of Hezbollah with the money, with all the infrastructures and everything I've spoken about. I don't see Lebanese government taking any chance with violations, with the clashes with Hezbollah, unless it will understand or it will have proofs that it is weak enough. Again, very unlikely. It depends whether the regime in Iran will fall. It depends how much damages we are going to cause to Hezbollah, and it's too soon to tell.
Yeah, I think that's a very comprehensive analysis of that situation. Another question here, are the Israelis or the Americans using laser weapons to shoot down drones? How exactly can the Iranian... Oh, so we have several questions in one. So let's start with the laser. George, this is something that I've been researching a little bit as well during this war. And look, the answer is at the beginning of this war, Iron Dome appears to have handled most of the drones coming in from Lebanon. The Israeli Air Force, even before the lasers officially became operational, which is at the start of this year. The start of this year, Rafael handed the Israeli Air Force the keys to the laser system and said it's now operational. But when the war began in the north, it was a combination of Iron Dome and basically guns that were being used by helicopters to shoot down some of these drones. Jets also fired missiles at them. Those were the primary means, and we can assume also probably electronic warfare. Now, my understanding is that the laser system, by the way, there are two laser systems. There's a big one and a smaller tactical one. The smaller tactical one was already in use back in 2024, and it shot down something like over 40 Hezbollah threats. So now the bigger one, my understanding is that it's begun to be used in an experimental way during this war, but this is a very gradual onboarding of the system. So the laser system is phenomenal technology, first operational air defense system in the world, but it only hits one threat at a time. It has to burn a hole, takes a little bit of time.
And it depends on the weather. And the weather in Israel in the past 10 days is rainy and foggy and clouds, and I'm not sure that the laser is effective in this kind of weather. At least what we heard in the past, that it's a problem to activate it in this kind of weather. I
It
would
is.
say, as a person who lives up north, that we see that the drones are intercepted much sooner than they used to be intercepted in the previous campaign. Like they just cross, and in most cases, they are intercepted almost immediately, and less people have to get to the bomb shelters. So, still, we do have almost every day here, 9 kilometers from Lebanon, almost every day I have a siren because of a drone, but it's much better than it used to be.
That's great news. And by the way, the heart and the key of all air defenses is first and foremost detection. Detection is radars, so having good
Yes.
radars, if you see the threat, then you can act. If no matter how good your interceptors are, whatever they are, if you don't see it, then it's not going to be relevant. So they're always being working on improvements at every level of the system. And the second part of George's question, how exactly can the Iranian people rise up when they don't have guns, but the IRGC has lots of guns and no problem using them? Well, George, I think you're absolutely right. This is why I think the Iranian regime is still in place. This has been something that I've been arguing about with many colleagues for a while now, even before the war. There is a major asymmetry between the besieged. These are killers running around with AK-47. Some of them have heavy machine guns, and they used heavy machine guns to mow down unarmed Iranian protesters across Iran back in January. So the Iranian opposition has got to get armed. It's got to get organized. I think it will do that, but I think it's a process. And right now, it's not symmetrical. It's not even close. So the only thing that could, I guess, cause a breakthrough here is if part of the Iranian army decides to turn on the regime. If that happens, then you don't need to wait for the opposition to get armed. Then you've already got armed opposition to the regime. But if you don't get those defections in big numbers, then I think it's going to be a longer process, and we don't know what's going to come first. I am, by the way, I just want to say I am optimistic in the long run. I do believe that this regime is going to fall. I just think it's way too ambitious to try and call when that will happen. There's just no way of knowing. Has there been any wholesale efforts to destroy the IRGC? George, the IRGC is the main target of the Israeli Air Force across its various forms, whether it's the IRGC missile bases, whether it's the Quds Force operating in Lebanon, or Quds Force bases in Tehran, which were hit, by the way, today. Quds Force, which is the overseas unit of the IRGC, is the main target in its various forms for the Israeli Air Force. It's the heart of the beast. It's the elite Iranian military. It's separate from the second army, what they call the Rush, I think they call it in Persian, Artash. They deliberately have a two military system in order to protect the regime with this elite military, which has also basically taken over Iran in every way, economically, politically, and it's pursuing its jihadist ideology throughout the Middle East. So absolutely, the IRGC is being hit at multiple levels by both the US and Israel. Another question, let's jump to this box. Noticing an increasing number of missiles falling or hitting. I think we addressed the missile question with a large margin of error. Oh, I think he is asking whether the Iranian missiles are getting worse. I don't have any data on that. I'm not sure about that. I just know the figures that I passed on to you. Everything else would be speculation. Another question, let's see. Where is the 60% nuclear material? Don't we need to find this material and render harmless? Very important question. We're talking about the 450 or so kilograms of highly enriched uranium that's enriched to the 60% level, which is just a stone's throw from the military grade 90% level. Now, according to some reports and research institutes that are highly respectable, especially David Albright's Research Institute, which is one of the leading trackers in the public field of this issue, the 60% enriched uranium is buried under at least two sites and possibly three. It's Isfahan. It could also be in Fordow, which is near Qom. And we don't know if any of it is in Natanz as well. So it's spread out between 2 to 3 sites. It's extremely heavy, and it's also very small. It's surprisingly small. It can fit into a 20-liter jerry can, reportedly, which is very surprising to imagine. So what's the answer? Here's the problem, okay? The idea of sending special forces to extract this is, look, I'm not a tactical planner, but I can only imagine how many points of failure exist in an operation like that. You're sending special forces into the heart of into the heart of Iran, into multiple places. They have to go in at the same time and extract extremely sensitive and heavy material. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's a hugely problematic operation. The far more, I would say, feasible option is to bury it under masses of rubble. That's what happened back in June. And then the Iranians extracted part of it and moved it. But I think it could be buried under even heavier rubble. And then those sites can be monitored by satellite and other means. And if anybody goes near them, they can be struck again. That might be a more feasible solution. Of course, there's the third solution, which at this stage seems unlikely, which is some sort of diplomatic deal, and the Iranians agreed to give it to a third party like what happened in the JCPOA. It's unlikely, but those are the three main options. It's a special forces extraction raid, it's burying it under rubble, further rubble, or making it unusable in some way, or a diplomatic arrangement that sees it leave the country. Right now, I think burying it is the most feasible, but who knows? There are talks happening between Trump and the Iranians, according to President Trump. So we really don't know what's going to happen with that, but it's a key question for this war. It's something to definitely watch. So
Now let's take
yeah,
like two last questions.
two last questions.
Just respect people's time.
Sure.
Just okay, let's take two last questions here. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question from Murray. Are you looking at a truce or a cold peace? Will the existential threat look at Israel in 5 to 10 years? So I'd like to hear your view on that
I'm
first.
going to surprise you. I do think there is going to be a threat. I don't know if it's existential, it depends on many things, but I think that once we win this threat we are fighting against now, we will face a new one, which is the Sunni axis that is being emerged in Syria with Qatar and Turkey. We just reported this week about Turkey giving light arms or small arms to Syria, which doesn't sound much. Okay, what is this? Just for local police and things like that. But that's the start. They share an ideology, which again, we have learned that once countries this size share radical ideologies, they are willing to do a lot of things around that. Qatar has the money, Turkey has the weapon and the military industry, and the motivation, and the power, and a member of NATO. And Ashara is the bridge. It's like the country that connects everybody, very close to everybody, threatening Israel, having a border with Israel as well. And I think, and the excuse, by the way, that we are taking the Golan. So I think this will be the next challenge. Unfortunately, to be honest, I didn't think so a year ago when Ashara came to power. I had a lot of hopes as somebody that my father was born in Syria and I wanted to go there. But I don't trust him. And I'm very worried about this as well. I don't trust neither Erdogan nor Ashara. And I'm very much worried that we are neglecting this front.
It's an important, I would say, exclamation mark over that issue. And I'll read the last question just before I do. First of all, I apologize to anybody whose question I didn't get to. You're welcome to send the questions. You can send them to Salit. You can also send them to me. And you can also find me, in addition to my work, which is published at the Alma Center on a very regular basis. You can also find me on my website, my podcast, which is Lapin Assessment. You can find that on Google. So you're welcome to.
Excellent one. Excellent.
Thank you. And Salit has been a guest, and you're going to be back there hopefully soon. The last question is from Lizette. The IRGC are present in Lebanon, leading military operations. They have said they will not leave, even after a possible peace agreement, in quotes, with Iran. Where does this leave Lebanon, and what do you anticipate? Salit, I want you to take this on, but I'll just say one thing about this. There's a division called the Imam Hussein Division, which is basically made up of it's a co-production of Hezbollah and the IRGC slash Quds Force. Quds Force is IRGC in every way. And it's very interesting because in the first days of this war, when we say that the IRGC are present in Lebanon, first of all, Israel told all Iranians in Lebanon, you have 48 hours to leave the country, and anybody who stays, don't take out life insurance. So we did see some Iranians leave.
150.
150, yeah. And the ones that stayed, they began to become targeted. Now, this Imam Hussein division, I think, is the key to the coordination efforts between Hezbollah and Iran. And several commanders and high-ranking operatives, terror operatives from this division have been eliminated. And I think that the IRGC's presence in Lebanon is something that I wouldn't bet heavily on it. I think it's one of the top priorities of the Israeli intelligence community and Air Force. They are hunting them down and eliminating them as soon as they find them wherever they are, including attempts to hide in non-Shiite areas of Beirut, something that has created complaints by the Lebanese prime minister. I think that they're being dealt with very thoroughly by the Israeli.
Yeah, and we did kill the head of the Lebanese Corps in Quds Force and the head of the Palestinian Corps in Quds Force and
Exactly.
a few more in a hotel in Beirut, maybe a few hotels. And I would just add one thing on top of everything you said around this issue. This is something, it's a good example for things that the Lebanese government can do because there are diplomatic relationship between Iran and Lebanon. The embassy of Iran in Lebanon is well known as the enabler of the IRGC activity in Lebanon. Okay, it's like a headquarters of the IRGC inside the embassy, and the ambassador is traditionally a part of this effort. If the Lebanese government wants to do something around it, this is the first step to close the embassy, to cut any relationship with Iran, to define it as an enemy that brought to the destruction of Lebanon. I'm not sure they will do that, but maybe from the small steps they can start, as they did call the IRGC to leave, and they did say that now they are going to ask visa for any Iranian that would like to get into Lebanon, which is better. It's in the positive direction, even though I'm not sure it's being enforced. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. But that's a start. Again, this is actually an example for something that can happen in the right direction.
Okay, so I think that
Okay.
wraps it up for us. Savit, I'll leave the concluding comments with you, but I just want to thank the audience for joining us and thank you for your excellent questions and your support. It means the world to us, your engagement with us. So thank you very much for attending this webinar.
Yeah, Lapin, thank you very much for joining me. I knew it's going to be a blow, something amazing. Thank you very much. And I just want to say to everybody, you are most welcome to follow us and to subscribe to our newsletter at the israel-alma.org. This is our website. We are also in all of social media. You are most welcome to send us the questions in any platform. We are there for you and we would love to answer. And I hope to see you soon in another webinar, and we will continue to answer your questions and keep you updated in every platform we can. Thank you, Lapin, for being with us, and we hope only for good news.